Have you ever been going along just having a fabulous day and then you get a message or a phone call from someone you really care about and find out that they are going through something really stressful or they're not having a good day and suddenly your whole mood shifts? It may not happen to everyone, but definitely happens to me, particularly if that person that's having a rough go is my mom or someone that I really care about. So, I wanted to talk a little bit today about how we can disassociate ourselves from the feelings of another person. And that doesn't mean not caring about how other people feel, not being empathetic to them, but not taking on someone else's pain as our own. Now, I did a video that I can link to all about how to navigate a loved one dying. So, when you're in a position where your loved one is very sick or they've been told that they're dying, oftentimes people will take the weight of their loved one and feel totally sad and drained and depressed, not just for themselves of losing this person, but they'll actually take on the pain that their loved one is experiencing. At least that has been my experience dealing with my mother, who has been terminally ill for a long time now. I heard in a TED Talk once the phrase, care, don't carry, which means be empathetic, but without actually taking on another person's pain. So, anyway, this is not all about terminal illness or navigating situations of that depth, but it got me thinking a lot about how we can free ourselves within relationship, not just romantic partnerships, although those certainly count, but even in friendships, in our familial relationships, but in different situations so that we can feel peace even when someone else may not be feeling peace, and how we can also give up the feeling of being responsible for someone else's happiness. So, three main points I wanted to touch on today. One, we ultimately are not responsible for how other people feel. Two, no one else is responsible for how we feel. And three, we are allowed to be happy no matter what. And I'll elaborate on each of those. Now, at first blush, hearing I'm not responsible for how you feel, it's kind of harsh. I actually had an ex-boyfriend say that to me once. And I was saying, when you do this, I feel blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm not responsible for how you feel. And I agreed with him at the time. It's like, yeah, you're right. You're not responsible for how I feel. And then I felt bad about myself for even asking these things of him. In hindsight, I do believe there is a balance to be had. No, he is ultimately not responsible for how I feel. No one can make us feel anything, and we cannot make anyone else feel anything. At the same time, we can be considerate of other people, and we can still reflect on and prioritize how our behaviors may be impacting someone else. I do believe it is our responsibility in relationship to any person, again, romantic partnership, friendship, stranger, acquaintance, whoever it is, we do play a role in their life. And so we can certainly think about how what we're doing might affect someone else, knowing that ultimately we don't know what's going to trigger them. We don't know their relationship to life. We don't really know their emotional relationship to us either. And so we may say something the wrong way. Doesn't necessarily mean it's our fault. It's how they interpret it. Coming to this realization that we are ultimately not responsible for anyone else's feelings can be very empowering, particularly if you're a person dealing with any sort of enmeshment. So for me, I have always dealt with enmeshment with my mother, and that means that I take on her feelings as my own. And this started in childhood and has very much influenced my adult life. And so then when she got sick, I would often, and I still do sometimes, take on her feelings of not her physical pain because I can't take that on, but if, for example, I'd be going about my day and then I'd get a message from her saying she was having a rough day physically, it would ruin my whole day. And I would actually sometimes feel guilty having a good day when she wasn't. And that's kind of what brought all of this up, because something happened for me recently with my mom where she and another person were having a conflict, and I felt really sad for her, and I felt like, oh gosh, how can I help? What can I say to make her feel better? And then I remembered, like, this isn't my responsibility. She's an adult woman. I can say the things that I think might help her feel better, but ultimately it's not my responsibility to solve her conflict. And I think that's so liberating and so empowering if you've ever been in a situation like this, reminding yourself you are not responsible for making that person happy. You're responsible for being kind and being empathetic and treating them with care and treating them with love. But ultimately, they're their own person. They have their own battles that they have to face. They have their own lessons that they have to learn in this lifetime. Everyone has their own karma. Everyone has their own path. And we cannot be responsible for anyone else's path other than our own. Now, I'm sure this comes up a lot for parents and children, and the dynamic there is a little different, meaning, in my case, I'm the child, but I'm talking about people who are the parents and they try to control their child's experience of the world. Now, parents are responsible for a child's physical well-being. And I think they're responsible for teaching a child emotional regulation. But at the end of the day, even a person's parent cannot control how they feel, cannot control your child's emotional state. You can help them, but ultimately you're still an external force to that child, and the child's peace has to come from within, which obviously children are, it's different. Things change as we grow and evolve, but as that child grows and develops even more autonomy, the parent has even less influence over that child's internal state. And I'm sure, I'm not a parent yet, but I've worked with a lot of children and I know a lot of parents, and I'm sure that it's hard for parents to release that control and trust that this is a person with their own free will, their own path, their own karma, their own life lessons that they need to learn. And even though we may ache for them and we may really, really want to be able to change the situation for them, we can't. I've even felt this a lot with my little brother, where times where I would just be distraught because he was going through something. And there's a difference between personally being devastated and letting that take everything out of you versus caring. Again, it's care, don't carry. I can care for my little brother. I can call him and stay on the phone with him for hours. I can write him letters to encourage him. I can do everything that I possibly can. But ultimately, me being upset on his behalf is not helping anything. And that was kind of the aha moment I had this morning when I wanted to, I felt a sense of anxiety because I didn't know how my mom was doing in this conflict she was having, and I really wanted to know. And then I was like, you know what? Me being upset about it is not helping the situation. It's not helping her feel better. I'm not even there, So then I realized all I can do, all any of us can do, is send the person peace, send the person love, and feel peace within ourselves to contribute to the larger ecosystem of peace and love in the world. There are a lot of spiritual texts that say, we are all connected. We are all a collective being. And if you believe that's true, then you know that all the negative thoughts that you think are contributing to the collective unconscious. All the negative thoughts that I'm thinking are contributing to the collective unconscious, and all the positive thoughts we're thinking are doing the same. So I could go down the rabbit hole and spiral and be sad and upset for something over which I have no control, that has nothing to do with me. Or I can say a prayer for that person, send them love, send them peace, wish them well, genuinely, say what I can to help, do what I can to contribute to make the person feel better if that's appropriate, and maintain peace within myself. And I think that's how we ultimately find freedom within relationship. To take that a step further, it's also remembering that if we're in the pattern of, if you do this for me, I will be happy, or if you feel this way, I will be happy, then we're bound to the feelings and emotions of someone else and to the behaviors of someone else. But ultimately, no one else's behavior can make us feel anything. We have to source that feeling. And of course, people's behaviors influence the way that we feel. And we want to surround ourselves with people who care about how we feel, knowing that they are not ultimately responsible for it, which is point 2. Just as we are not responsible for anyone else's happiness, no one else is responsible for our own. So my ex was right when he said, I'm not responsible for how you feel. At the same time, I don't want that to sound like I'm suggesting spending time with people who don't care about your feelings. Be with people who want to make you happy, who want to make you feel good, or want to contribute to your happiness, who elicit joy from within you, who elicit and inspire peace within you, not people who trigger you. And of course, we never want to intentionally harm someone else. So it would be wrong, for example, to go call someone ugly and say really mean things to them and say, it's not my fault they're upset. I can't help how they feel. It's up to them how they feel. It's like you can't punch someone in the face and say, oh, it's not my fault you're hurting. Of course, we do play a role. So that's why, we have to play our part in being kind, being loving, all of that. And we want to surround ourselves with people who treat us with care, treat us with love, treat us with respect, and knowing ultimately that that can contribute to our overall state of peace. But if we're we're expecting that someone else's behavior will bring us an inherent sense of joy or happiness or peace, we'll be waiting forever. Because someone can do something that makes us feel good, that's pleasurable and pleasant, but it's not going to sustainably source peace for the rest of our lives. Even if you're with that person for the rest of your life, that ultimately has to come from you. And that can sound really exhausting, but I think it's so liberating to know that I'm in my world here. As long as I'm connected with God, with the universe, with my angels, with my spirit, whatever you believe, you're connected with yourself and your source, then everyone else is a character in your movie, and we can contribute to their lives. We can bring them joy as much as we're able, and they can bring us joy. And we can also bring them pain, and they can bring us pain. And that's something for us to work through. But ultimately, if we disassociate from feeling dependent on someone else's behavior as our source of peace or our source of happiness, we'll ultimately be much more peaceful and much more at peace and much happier. So the third point I want to make, which has also been incredibly helpful for me and something I started for a while doing as a daily affirmation, is that we are allowed to be happy, no matter what. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes I used to feel really guilty when my mom was sick and I was off living my best life. And then my mom would be like, don't feel guilty. I want you to be happy. I don't want you giving up your life because I'm sick. So remember that too. No one wants to see us suffer on their behalf. And we're allowed to be happy, even if someone else is suffering. As long as we're not happy at their expense, so it's not, well, they have to suffer in order for me to be happy. That's not good, because we want ultimately everyone to be happy, everyone to be at peace. But for example, if you're watching the news and you're seeing videos of all these starving children around the world, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to be happy because there's hardship in the world. That means we can play our part, donate to the organization, volunteer, do whatever you can to contribute to that cause, and recognize those people are on their own path and they have certain lessons that they came into this lifetime needing to learn. You being sad for them and suffering and saying, oh my gosh, I can't be happy because there are people in this world that are at war. Of course, it's natural to feel sad, especially if you have family over at war. And remember, you sitting in that negative space forever isn't helping the situation. Care, don't carry. Care about the people at war. Do what you can. But you don't have to carry the weight of that hardship. You just don't. And it's hard for me to even say this. And I find myself wanting to, and probably actually giving a ton of caveats of like, oh, but, because we've been trained, or at least I've been trained to take on the guilt, to be guilty when other people are suffering and I'm having a good time. In my psyche, there's an association between happiness and success and shame. Like, I should feel guilty about that. But that's really silly. We are meant to be joyful. We are meant to be happy. We're meant to be beacons of light and love in this world. Every spiritual text comes down to being a source of love, and sourcing that from God is what most spiritual texts would say. So we don't have to feel guilty for feeling good and for being sources of love. And that is not antithetical to having empathy and to caring about something. And it's sending so much love and peace and taking action in ways that we can, again, donations, volunteering, whatever it is that will contribute to other people's happiness without sacrificing our own. So the affirmation that I try to repeat to myself, because even saying it out loud, I'm not sure that I totally buy it. I'm kind of like, oh, that still feels selfish. It still feels self-centered. But what I'm repeating to myself is, I'm allowed to be happy. And you're allowed to be happy. It doesn't have to come, and it should not come at anyone else's expense. It is you being happy, because that is helping you be the biggest light that you can be for the world. We don't have to be a martyr. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's good. There I go with the caveats again. Because I don't want this to be misconstrued. I don't want someone to listen to this video and say that I'm being selfish and saying, oh, just go out and do your own thing. Because I think there's a lot of poor messaging and a lot of misinterpretation with the messaging, where we think we've become hyper independent. And so the whole, like, I'm not responsible for your happiness can be really toxic in a relationship, as it was in mine. The example with my ex, that was a toxic belief, because from his point of view, he was saying, it doesn't matter what I do, you're responsible for your feelings. When ultimately, in a relationship, we are interdependent on one another, and that's not a bad thing. So my point is, I don't want to come across as saying prioritize yourself above everything else. It's prioritize yourself within the community. So you're prioritizing the community too, but you're prioritizing yourself so that you can show up best in the community. By being responsible for our own feelings in a relationship, we can better help our partner feel their feelings. We can help bring out positive feelings in them as well. And if I'm feeling good and feeling at peace, I'm more likely to engage in behaviors that will help other people feel good and feel at peace within themselves. Versus if I'm waiting for someone else to make me feel good, then I'm probably going to be in a negative space until they do the thing that makes me feel good. And then, only then, will I do something to make them feel good. And then it becomes transactional. And that's not unconditional love, that's transaction-based love. And that typically isn't healthy. And it's not sustainable and can become toxic. So all of this is to say, we can, if we really sit with this and reflect on it and feel into it and interpret it in a healthy way, a lot of liberation can come from knowing we are not responsible for anyone else's feelings. They have their own path. No one else is responsible for our feelings. People are going to trigger us. That trigger is a sign from our nervous system that we have something to work on. It's not the other person's responsibility. It's ours. And we are allowed to be happy. We have permission to be happy even if other people are suffering. We're not happy at their expense. We're happy even though they're suffering, just like when we're suffering, other people are allowed to be happy. If I'm having a bad day, doesn't mean you can't have a great one. I want you to have a great day. If I'm suffering and then you start suffering for me, I'm going to feel even worse because now I've ruined your day. Okay? So I just felt compelled to share that today. I hope it was helpful. Let me know if you have any thoughts, if there's anything that felt a little ambiguous, and I will link some related videos. I appreciate you taking the time to watch.